Richard, we've already introduced in the first session, but Richard and Kate have built a very impressive passive house in the Cape Patterson Eco Village. So, Richard, you might just tell us a little bit about your new home.
Hi, Liz. Thanks very much. Hi, everybody. My wife, Kate, and I have been in this house since February 2021. So 2020 was our build year. And yeah, so it was a bit of a COVID build. The house is soon to be certified passive house. It's a 3-bedroom house, NatHERS rating 8.4 stars. It's timber floor on stumps, which most of the other houses on the estate here are slab on grade, so it's a bit different there. It's not very big internally, 132 square meters internal floor area with separate garage, and it's on a site that's got quite a slope, so there's about over 4 meters drop from one corner of the site to the other. So, and there's views to the southeast and southwest. So it's a bespoke build to take advantage of the site. And yeah, it's a lovely house designed by Luke Middleton, built by Dave Martin of Martin Builders and the Sustainable Sociable Weaver Group. And yeah, we love it.
And also, the landscaping outside is just magnificent, coastal seascape landscaping, and it's, I guess it's only a year in, it looked magnificent when I was there, yeah. Yes. Okay, I think also everybody, gardens are a huge part of being sustainable. They provide shade, food, shelter. So we have a relaxing gardening session coming up, which you can all relax in. But yeah, I think gardens are an important part of every house that we have today. So the Strathfield house is next. So Jill and John, I'm not sure who's going to describe your house, but I know you're really happy with it.
I'll start off. This is a downsize. We lived out of town. We have 4 children, so we had a large house on a fairly large property. And as we were getting older, we thought, well, perhaps it's time to think about the future. And so we've got a smaller house now. It's just got 1 main bedroom, and we have a large study with a drop-down wall bed, so we can have guests. And that's our guest room. Otherwise, the house is just has a large living area. Total area is about 128 square meters in the house. We built it so that it can be used if some of us, one or other of us, or both of us, become a bit disabled. So we have wide doorways. We have plenty of turning space for potentially for wheelchairs or walkers with toilets. We have a shower that we can get into, walker. We have mostly sliding doors. We have all our taps have large handles for people with arthritic hands and the like. So we were planning this for old age. We're also planning it to be sustainable, so it's well insulated. It has double-glazed windows and mainly north facing, and it has worked very well to give us winter sun and summer shade. The last winter's been a bit more challenging, because as we all know, it's been fairly cloudy and cold and miserable. On the nice sunny days, the house is beautiful inside. On the cold, miserable, cloudy days, we have to boost a little bit of heating. We've got just heating, a split system is the only heating and cooling we have. But that during the day, that's fine, because we've got plenty of 9 kilowatt solar system, and that covers our usage during the day. Unfortunately, it doesn't cover our system during the night, so we do import a bit of power. But even during winter, we're exporting 70% to 80% of what we generate, but we then buy some more at night. So that's fine. Overall, we're net exporting vast amounts of electric energy. and I think our house is probably positive, even though it's not built to passive standards. It was built to a budget where we didn't have lots of money, so we haven't gone to passive house standard, but we've used the design features of light and energy and through ventilation and all the standard sorts of things, and it's working very well for us. It's a small house on an infill block, a battle block cut off from somebody else's backyard, but there's, because the house is very small, there's still plenty of room for a smallish but quite substantial garden, and that's mainly planted with plants, mainly native and mainly indigenous plants, so that it can survive the next drought, which is going to come. But we also have wicking boxes that we grow veggies, and we have some berries and other things too.
Okay, thanks. Now we have Roni and Daniel. They haven't built yet. They're still in this planning stage. Now, we might have a little discussion, Roni, with you about how long it's taking to plan, because it takes quite a while, doesn't it? And it's not an easy process. In fact, sometimes the building can be easier than the planning. So welcome, Roni from Castlemaine, and they're building a sort of modular house. So tell us about it.
Yes, Liz, thank you. Well, Daniel and I, firstly, to introduce ourselves, we've been living in Bendigo now for about 6 years. And there was a discussion whether we should move back to Melbourne, but we love the region, the countryside, and that's something that we decided we're going to stick. And we bought this land in Barker's Creek, about 5-acre land. So I guess the planning starts from, what we wanted in terms of a dream house, and that is about sustainable living, giving back to the environment, and about our values. So I guess that's where it's coming from. And yeah, so we have decided to go with Ortec Industries, which is a Bendigo-based company. They have a factory here. So they do modular systems. So basically, it's one of the most sustainable way of building, because they build the modules in their factory, and it's because it's going to be a very fast way to build. It's once we get all the plans and permits approved, I think it's going to take them only 5 months to build all the modules, and we're building according to our design, they're building 4 module systems. So it's a 200 square meter floor area house to cater for our needs and what we want to achieve in our lifestyle. And I don't know if anyone knows about Ortec. They also use their signature product, which is DuraPanel. So for their wall system, the flooring system, and the ceiling, they use DuraPanel, which is also a very sustainable material coming from straw. So the straw, instead of being burnt, they collect this from the farmers in the area, in the region, and they compact it and make it into a DuraPanel, which is now they mainly use at the moment in the commercial side. So they've been a company that actually provides for shopping centers, stadiums. So because they are fireproof, has a high thermal insulation, and also in terms of acoustics as well. Yeah, what else? That's pretty much it.
We might ask you when you bought the land, and how many years have you spent planning already?
Oh, we bought the land last year, Liz.
Oh,
So
you're going quickly.
we are very quick. Yeah, in this type planning. Well, it's because it's, as I said, throughout the years of living in Bendigo, we've actually had businesses that we have already been, putting our values in. So we are franchise owners of restaurants, quick service restaurants, and we're all about sustainable, using, well, we put up solar systems in our businesses, and we train our staff to be able to, you know, also adapt to our values by recycling, composting, that sort of thing. Yeah, so it all comes down from there.
Tell us what your business is so we can support you.
Well, we have Schnitz.
Ah.
We used to have the one in Bendigo, we've just sold recently. We have in Shepherd, and throughout the 10 years we've had this franchise business, we've had about 4 or 5 stores. Yes.
You're busy people. I might mention, not to want to give too big a plug to businesses, that but Ortec in Bendigo do make small modular, I won't call them huts, but small modular units for kids undercover. So they actually provide units free of charge to kids undercover, and they put these in people's backyards and usable spaces for homeless kids or kids who are having issues and need their own space. So yeah, I mean, it's a good industry with good values, and it's interesting that you're building with them. A few years ago, we had a small modular build with Ortec, and this was a single person who actually built on a small cut-off block, and yeah, they built it themselves with lots of help from Ortec, lots of phone calls, and I think that his total build then was 65,000. But folks, things has changed a bit since then. A few years later, and we're more expensive down the track with materials and things we need for building. So I might ask just everybody, just we all want to build efficiently, and that means lots of insulation. I have a question about slabs. So not for Richard, because he hasn't built on a slab, which is unusual for passive house, I imagine. But I've got a question about insulating slabs. Is anyone insulating their slab?
We do a lot of that. We do a lot of.
How do you insulate it, and what do you use?
Yeah, I actually get this question online a lot when we post about it. Most of our builds are concrete slab, and we use a waffle design slab for the majority of that. We used to use an XPS foam, a 50mm XPS foam, and that I started using that because it does have a higher R value than an EPS foam. There was a Canadian builder who pointed out to me online that the greenhouse gases on XPS is 10-fold to EPS foam. So we made a change. We're using a 50mm EPS foam under our slabs. What that does though is where you have a pier, a point load under the slab, you need to go to an XPS foam because it's more dense. So it has a higher strength rating. Okay,
so are they a sort of spray foam?
No, it comes in a panel. You can get 50mm panel or 100mm panel. In that region, if you're looking for a certified passive house, you most likely need a 100mm of foam under the house, and that's what we've done on a few projects. So that foam will go under the entire slab and then up the side of the slab as well. And then we fix that to the side of the slab using like a masonry anchor, and then that gets rendered on the outside, and that render then is the visual, what you see after the house is complete. And the EPS foam render adheres to that better than XPS. So
is there a simple explanation of the difference between XPS and EPS?
One's a closed cell foam and one's an open cell foam. XPS it's more dense, it's stronger, and does have a better R value, but don't get caught up on that, because EPS, while the R value is slightly lower, the greenhouse gases are a fraction of XPS. So if you want to try and be green, and as soon as I found that out, we swapped overnight. We changed to EPS overnight. There are different strength grades, so you need to make sure that you're getting a strength grade that is suitable for underground, and your suppliers should be able to lead you to that. Yeah.
Okay. Jill and John, did you insulate
if I could just
slab?
make a comment there, it's great that Scott is insulating edge of slab. It's really uncommon in Australia, and a big factor in the technique in how to do it relates to making things termite safe. And there's a best practice guide from a New South Wales architect named Dick Clark from Envirotexture. So if you just Google Dick Clark slab edge insulation, you'll find his guide, which is it's been around a few years, but it's still the best one around. And yeah.
Thanks for that, Richard. It is that detail where the foam comes up the outside of the slab and where your frame sits, that's a challenge that we've looked at time and time again. And I'll probably look at that resource myself to see if we can learn anything from it. Yeah.
Richard, so just a question for you. Why did you not build on a slab?
A few reasons. The site being very sloping lends itself to a lightweight structure. I'm also not as convinced as many that high thermal mass is necessary for good performance. And yeah, it's common to see high performance houses on slabs, but here at the Cape, we've got 2 passive house builds and one additional under construction, and they're all timber floor on stumps. So yeah, you can get good performance without being on a slab, and the other factor was it's just that feel of timber underfoot. So I much prefer it to walking on concrete, and I think there's some evidence that it's better for you ergonomically to have that sprung floor rather than being on a slab.
Okay, so how did you insulate under the slab? Oh, sorry, under the timber floor.
Yeah, it's R5 glass fiber bats, so full thickness of the floor beams, and yeah, so it's pretty thick. So there's yeah, that was one of the very first things that were done. Actually, it was they put down the bearers and then laid an airtight wrap, then put the insulation on top of that, and then the joists, and then the floor on top. So yeah, the floor raft structure was all made together initially. So instead of the insulation being added after the floor was put in, it was done before.
Yep, I'm sure Ian out of Fiona and Ian at Epiloc would have loved to have been able to do that instead of crawling under his floor for weeks retrofitting that insulation. R5 is pretty high level for underfloor, so it's fantastic. No wonder the house works really well. John and Jill, do you know if you insulated your slab?
Oh, we didn't. Our builder suggested to us that in our particular situation with the design, the location, it probably wasn't going to make an enormous difference, and it was going to be quite a lot more expensive with building at that place. So we went without insulation of the slab. Seemed to perform well. We don't have anything to compare it with, I guess. We don't have a direct comparison, but no, we didn't.
Okay, well, it's working well. So, you know, we don't all have to do the same thing, but yeah, some people can do best practice if they can.
If I can just make one more point. Under slab insulation in our climate zone works for you in winter and works for you in summer. The slab insulation helps in winter, but doesn't help in summer. Whereas I've got that wrong. Under slab helps in winter and not in summer, but edge of slab helps all year round. So yeah, the edge of slab is often missed, and that's where it's going to help all year round.
Okay. Interesting point. Roni, are you having a timber floor or a slab?
Well, because it's a modular build, Lise, well, I'm new to this as well, but I believe because it's a modular build and it's got Dura panel there, which already has that thermal efficiency insulation. Plus, we're putting still some insulation beds as well, and we have on top of it also hybrid flooring to be compliant with BAL 29 rating. So all that, yeah, that's pretty much logical not to put on a slab. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you know exactly what the R factor is of the Dura panel?
No, I don't know at this stage.
That's
Sorry,
okay.
I can look it up.
It's good to
Yeah.
hear that you're putting bats in as well, because I think you probably need more than just the Dura panel on your floor to get a good rating and seal there.
Liz, I might interrupt just for a second. So just for those who aren't aware, we have our chat here where you can put your questions in for our speakers. And what I'll also do is, as things come up in conversation, I'll track them down and throw them in the chat. So we've had some chat about the Dura panel, so I've put a link in for that. And then also Richard referred to an article about the slab edge insulation. So I think I found that one and I've put that in there as well. One thing that's coming up, I don't know, Liz, if you're ready for a question that I think might be relevant to the speakers. So I think this is a really good question, and something that, especially from a new build point of view, where we're not trying to retrofit, we haven't inherited anything. What is everyone doing for heating and cooling? AKA, what are their plans for heating and cooling in the new home, or what have they decided on? So Liz, I'll throw back to you.
Yeah, I was going there for sure, because it's a really important question. So we'll start with Scott. What's the heating and cooling out at Sedgwick?
Heating and cooling, they've got a ducted, reverse cycle ducted in this project. Being off grid and most homes who are putting solar on find that cooling in summer with reverse cycle is free. You can just crank it. Especially with off-grid when you've got an abundance of power in summer. Winter is always a challenge with our off-grid projects to get enough power to do the heating side of things. If you had a very small house, you could probably rely on a reverse cycle, but the larger homes, what we find with off-grid is they use a wood heater. That's pretty common. And again, the off-grid homes are rural. They've often got their own wood to collect, so that's a benefit there. This project just has a single wood heater in the living area. It's not ducted. But if you did look at ducting options, some of the options we do, one we just finished in Kyneton, they just had a single fan duct that sat above the heater and it pulled air out of that room to the other end of the house. And one we did an off-grid one we did in Malmesbury last year. He did a fully ducted system off the wood heater, and that is called Turbo Heat. You can probably put a link up to them. That's a pretty good system. It pulls the heat out of the flue, an outer ring of the flue, and then transfers that heat to each room, and you're able to control each room, open and close each duct in each room. So you can provide heat to the kid's bedroom, but not the spare bedroom, for example.
And I'm pretty sure Ian and Fiona have that in the next session. So you'll be able to ask them about, they transfer their heat from their flue of their fire, and I might be turbo heat.
Yeah.
Okay. Richard, what are you doing for heating and cooling?
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, we use split systems. The entire house is heated and cooled with one 5 kilowatt, two-headed multi-split. So there's a rule of thumb with heating and cooling that you need in the order of between 130 and 150 watts of thermal heat capacity per square meter of floor area. But the more efficient a house is, the lower that number is. So if a conventional house needs, let's say 140 watts a square meter, our house is only about 40 watts per square meter. So it's quite a lot different. And I just make the comment that I'm strongly of the view that the way we do ducted systems generally in Australia is highly problematic. If you're interested, my blog, I have a blog called newenergythinking.com, and one of my posts on there is about why I think ducting is problematic. And so, yeah, take a look at that before you do ducting. You'll need much less energy if you use split systems. Split systems can be done for entire houses without difficulty. Happy to talk about that more if people are interested.
Okay, Jill and John, I think you've already told us that you've got, how many split systems have you got? Just the one?
Yeah, just the one. Our main living area opens out, well, study opens into the main living area, and we've just got the one internal unit for that. We don't bother about the bedroom. We've just got a fan in the bedroom. Bathroom, because of some fortunate circumstances, we ended up with a little bit more money than we thought we might have. And because the bathroom is to the south, we've put in some under tile electric heating that we just turn on in winter for an hour or so before we get up in the morning, so that the floor is a little bit warmer on the toes while we have a shower. But I think that probably helped to keep it a bit drier too in the winter months.
Okay, and are you finding running that on the solar possible, I guess, in summer, and you don't need it, but in winter, you have to get up later.
That's the disadvantage. The under tile heating in the bathroom has to be when the sun's not shining, really. So we lose out on that. But the split system for heating and cooling, provided we heat it during the day, heat the place, and that's all right. When we heat it in the evening, then that's we do have to employ a bit of energy, but we don't need a lot of it. And on sunny winter days, we don't need it at all.
Okay. Roni, what are you planning to having in Castlemaine? Barkers Creek might be a little bit cooler than Bendigo.
Yeah, indeed, Lee. So because we're going to be off grid and it's going to be a purely electric home, the most efficient way for us to heat and cool the house, from what I've seen in the in that group, the page, the Facebook group MEH, is the Daikin split systems. So we're putting in each room just what's required. Hopefully, just like Gillian and John, we won't have to heat or cool the house, because we're going to have a 7.2 stars energy rating, putting in UPVC windows and doors, double glazed. So yeah, hopefully we won't use them as much anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. We might, I see Richard's put in there, My Efficient Electric Home. That's a great resource for everybody, whether you want to go more electric or just what products people are using. And as Roni mentioned, the Dakin's pretty popular in My Efficient Electric Home. Richard's one of the admins on that. So lots of information coming through and lots of good resourced information. Yeah, and I think it, you know, when I joined, there was about 6,000 members. Now there's 60,000 or more. So yeah, it's a really good resource.
Yeah.
Yep. So when you get in that Facebook group, you can type in subjects you want to research, and there'll be leads there of, you know, for instance, what heat pump people are using, which model, etc. So yeah, it's a great resource. Have we got some more questions, John?
Yeah, so I think the chat about heating and cooling has certainly got people thinking about the heat pump, split system, whichever terms you want to do. So we've got a couple of specific questions here, and we're probably quite lucky to have Richard, who might have a bit of insight into some of these. So one is that, and this is I've never really encountered this, and I'll be interested to see. So we've got a question from Simon asking, should a heat pump be placed on the north side of the house for increased efficiency? So is there what does that, Richard, is there any sort of insight you might have into that observation?
Yeah, it'll help in winter and hurt in summer. So it depends on your balance of where you think the most energy is going to be used. So we're in a heating dominated climate. So things that are going to help in winter are probably going to help you use less energy overall.
Right. And that's obviously a reflection of how the actual sort of technology works within a heat pump, right?
Yeah, the ambient air temperature is a factor in how well heat pumps work. So in a hot climate, you'd prefer to put the outside unit in a in a place that's as cool as possible outside, and likewise in a cool climate, you'd put it somewhere that's going to get a bit of sun. And obviously you can't do both.
Yes.
Easily. So you have to make a trade-off based on what you think is more important.
That's great. And I think I'll just build on that one. So we had a question here, a request from Kim asking about split systems with large double-story new build with some double volume sections. So I guess it's a case of to what extent a split system interacts with double-story buildings.
My last house in Melbourne was a 2-story timber house, and we had 2 multi-split arrangements. So I've already posted a link to that blog post about to split or not to split, if you're interested. So, but basically, split systems aren't necessarily what people usually associate with split systems. In other words, you don't have to have one outside unit for every inside unit. A multi-split lets you have multiple inside units connected to one outside unit. That simplifies the outdoor arrangement. It simplifies the electrical wiring. And most importantly, it makes the aesthetics much better because you don't have the outside of your house plastered with these boxes. So Kim, in answer to your question, you might find that something like 2 multi-split installations lends itself to you. Maybe you'll have 1 multi-split upstairs and 1 multi-split downstairs. But yeah, you'd have to see your plans to see what makes sense.
That's fantastic. I do want to echo to everyone that's attending that we have a real expert here, Richard, so please do make the most of him. I'm going to shamelessly exploit the fact we have this expert here, so please do throw your questions in the chat. There is one here also for Jill and John. So there's a question about micro water heaters, which I think you spoke to. So would you be able to speak to that a little bit? So basically the question is essentially what brand and the upfront cost for these. Maybe
and
you
also,
could just...
John, I think why they decide to go with it.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, well, the reason was that bathroom, laundry are at one end of our house and the kitchen is at the other end. Just happened that that's how things worked out. And we'd had experience previously with houses that when you wanted to run something in the kitchen, it took forever to get hot water and then, of course, to cool down when you're halfway through the washing up. So our solution was to use a heat pump for the main volume of water in the bathroom and laundry, and then in the kitchen where we just have occasional uses of small volumes. We've put in, the brand is actually Micro Heat. It's a Melbourne company that uses some electrolytic technology that just heats the water on demand. And it comes through, we've got the heating unit just under our kitchen sink. And so when you turn on the tap, provided more than 1.5 litres per minute, it heats up, and then when you switch it off, it stops heating. So it does use a fair bit of energy while you're using it, but at other times, not at all. So we've had a little bit of teething problems. This is fairly new technology, and but that's all seems to have been ironed out now. The company was very cooperative. We've actually got a 3-phase heating unit, which I've heard people saying, oh, this is all hearsay, that the single-phase unit is perhaps less effective than the three-phase unit for this particular purpose. But we can set the temperature. We currently set the heat to 60 degrees. We could have up as far as 65 if we wanted to. But yeah, that's worked quite well for us.
Yeah, that's interesting. The ability to heat water instantly with electricity, it's technically straightforward, but needs a lot of electrical power, as John mentioned. So the ability to do it with your electrical connection depends a lot on the incoming water temperature, the cold water temperature. So in our climate zone, that temperature might be in the order of 16 to 18 degrees and needs a fair bit of power. So yeah, there's generally a rule of thumb that at our low cold water temperatures and for the expected flow rates that most people are going to want, that you will need three-phase power to do it. You know, in other countries where the cold water is warmer and the flow rates that you can tolerate are perhaps lower, then lots of people tolerate single-phase instant electric.
But in this case where they're just using it for their kitchen sink, basically.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because they're using it for such a short period and such small amounts.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, but more broadly, heat pump hot water services is kind of the most commonly recommended way of achieving efficient domestic hot water. Yeah, there's some interesting discussions about that versus solar hot water, but yeah, people might have questions about that.
Yeah,
there is one.
one.
Evacuated tubes versus heat pumps. I think I could probably answer that in that I used to sell evacuated tubes, but now I have a heat pump. They just seem to operate a whole lot more simply from a layman's level and have less issues. The evacuated tubes are pretty efficient though and very long lasting, much better than the old flat panels. So, but these days I think heat pumps are winning over everyone's building wishes. So yeah, and there's a lot on the market now and there's quite a range of prices and units. And again, if you go on My Efficient Electric Home Facebook page, you'll find comparisons and lots of discussions about which ones people like and which ones people love. Yeah, and we might just ask everybody. So I think John and Jill, they've got a heat pump, hot water.
That's correct. We've got a reclaim heat pump. We went for this one partly because it's a local company in Melbourne, and partly because they use carbon dioxide refrigerant rather than the hydrocarbon refrigerant. And so we felt that was environmentally more effective. And on the whole, we've been pretty happy.
Yeah, that's the same one as I use. The other thing I'd say is that when people are choosing a hot water service, that you can't separate your choice about the size of the tank from the choice of your shower head. That I'd encourage people to think of them as one decision, that if you have a high performance, low flow rate shower head like the Methven Curie Satin Jet, that you probably can get by with a smaller tank than you think. So we've only got a 160 litre tank. Very often people, I think, tend to end up with bigger tanks than they need.
Yep, I agree. I might ask Scott in on this. You're building a lot of passive and eco houses.
Yep.
Are you using heat pumps?
Yeah, we're using heat pumps pretty much on every home. Starting probably 8 years ago, I did do evacuated tubes for about 2 years, and warranties were an issue on a lot of them. I put one on my house. It didn't have a warranty issue, but you do get problems with frost and installation, and it was a common occurrence, unfortunately. We were often getting warranty issues on them. Same with the heat pumps. The cheaper heat pumps, we were also getting some warranty issues on them. The Sandon and the Reclaim are probably the two best if you can push your budget. We seem to just get less warranty issues on them. There is if you're in Bendigo, we often also install the Renai heat pump. The one benefit of that is that our supplier is the local service agent. I mean, these systems, you're always going to, you know, when you're building and buying as many as we are, we notice the warranties as opposed to someone who just buys one. So that is beneficial using Holloway there. We get their heat pumps, which is the Renai, but every home is pretty much a heat pump now. We have done one project. The benefit of the Sandon, and I think the Reclaim is the same, is the tank is separate to the actual the heating system itself. So we have done one project where we put the tank inside, which I think is pretty beneficial, and Richard might be able to add to that. It was a project in Gisborne, putting the heat inside the envelope of the home. It's a controlled temperature, so the tank itself isn't subject to 0 degrees overnight, which is pretty good, beneficial in keeping that warm water, the water warm overnight. And Richard might be able to add to that.
Yeah, we did that, and the in a heating dominated climate, the heat loss from the tank actually contributes to the warming of the house. So
yeah, that's the same as in a passive house. When we model, I believe the tradition of insulating your hot water pipes to keep the water warmer is a good idea. But in a passive house, if you're going for certification, I believe not insulating your hot water pipes adds to your heating load and therefore reduces your heating demand. I believe it's beneficial in a certification point of view, but
yeah, and you definitely need insulated hot water pipes in a passive house. There's another factor with heat pump systems that often comes up, and that's the noise level. Heat pumps are a mechanical device that do have a little bit of noise associated with them, and just people should be aware that there's generally an expectation that they will be less than 50 decibels rated sound level, but depending upon where you put them and how you use them, 50 dB might be a bit noisy. So if it's outside a bedroom window and you boost overnight, then that might be an issue. So just be mindful of that. And some of the units are much better than others in that regard. So the Sandon and Reclaim units are exceptionally quiet. They're rated 37 or 38 decibels. And they're just uncanny how quiet they are, whereas the ones that are actually getting up close to 50, yeah, they can be a bit annoying depending upon when you operate them.
Liz, just another point of that, we also have our tank inside the house, which is quite good, but we did make what in retrospect may have been a mistake. We put the heat pump on the roof for various reasons. It was convenient to have it a bit close to the tank, but we have found, even though we've got a heat trap, we do lose a little bit of heat by a thermosiphon from the tank through to the pipework on the roof. And so we're looking seriously at changing that and putting the heat pump itself back at ground level.
If you're getting a thermosiphon action, you need a heat trap arrangement or a check valve in line there to stop that convection up through the pipe. And doing that's going to be a lot cheaper than relocating the unit.
We have had a heat trap put in, but it's not ideally located because of the particular geometry of the system. But we're looking further into that.
Interesting.
Okay, Bronnie, are you putting in a heat pump for hot water?
Yeah, definitely, Liz. So we're also using Reclaim. obviously in terms of the sustainability aspects of having for the more expensive units like Reclaim, because they use CO2 rather than your normal refrigerant. Obviously, you have to go for the most energy efficient, because if you're going off grid, the less energy it uses during the time you are producing the most energy during the day. You're able to collect the hot water during that time. So that's all the factor in choosing that. If you choose for the least expensive one, then you might have to maybe get another unit in 3 years, 4 years time, from what I'm hearing.
There's an interesting tension there between the value proposition of the more expensive ones and their performance. There's a new product on the market that might be a bit of a sweet spot from Apricus. So Reclaim was a company founded by the same guy who developed Apricus for solar hot water, a guy named Chris Taylor. But under the Apricus brand, Chris is bringing out a new system, which is an integrated, not a split system heat pump. That's it's better value, and it's not as high end as the Reclaim unit. So that's worth looking at. So if you just look up Apricus heat pump, they're quieter than most of the integrated units. They use R290 as a refrigerant, which is better than a lot of the refrigerants, and a lot cheaper than the Reclaim.
I actually got Apricus just installed, Richard, in our current house in Bendigo. So that's good you mentioned that.
Good.
Okay, do we have any more questions?
Yeah, there's a fair few to sort of, and to those who've put them in there, I might sort of edit a little bit in terms of how we're addressing them. We still have a good chunk of time, so we will get to them all. I think actually Ronnie's put one in there, and I think it's worth talking about, because I think the build Scott was on was an off-grid build, and we're increasingly getting more of that. And so obviously in an unstable climate in terms of rainfall, how do you sort of plan for water when you're off the grid? I don't know if Scott has any insights into how that's factored in for builds or things like that.
We don't really do rainfall calculations on the homes. You can do that. You can look at your area, do rainfall calculation, size of the roof, number of people, and it'll size it up for you. When we have done that, and it's a smaller home, and it might come up as a 60,000 litre tank or an 80,000 litre tank, we just find 100,000 litre tank is a sweet spot. Like it's probably overkill if it's just one or two people in the home, but for families, like it's a sweet spot in terms of price. If you look at the cost of buying a water tank and installing it, it's a very expensive way to get water to your home compared to living in town and paying a bill over 10 years. We just do 100,000 litres most of the time, sometimes 125, just one large tank. And it really comes down to just cost. Even comparing, we would have done a couple of projects where people have had some size restraints and they've wanted smaller 20,000 litre tanks stacked up. If the price of building is high, that seems to be the sweet spot for us. It's easy to install. Usually if you're off grid, you've got the space, or if you're requiring water, you're obviously rural, so you've got the space. 100,000 litres is pretty much what we put on 90% of our homes. We do a Rhino tank. There are some better products on the market in terms of the quality of the finished stainless steel. There's another brand that uses a powder coated steel, but we do Rhino because it's a good product with good warranties, and the bladders are really good. It's got a 5-layer bladder, I think, instead of a 3-layer bladder. But that's what we normally do.
Yeah, if people want to figure out how big a tank they need for certain coverage, I've just posted a link to Tankulator, which is an online calculator, which you can plug in how much water you need and the size of the tank and where you are, and it'll estimate how well that tank will cover your needs
That's great. That's fantastic. So hopefully we've sort of covered a bit of that there, and good to have those insights. The other question I'm going to a bit earlier on now in the chat, but it's in that off-grid, and it's a little bit of an interesting question here, is about how we supply power for the construction phase on an off-grid. So Scott would perhaps be able to speak to that. I'm assuming just generators, but is there any thought of things like solar and things like that?
Yeah, we've tried everything. We always need generators to some degree or another, especially early phase. We just use a 5 kilowatt petrol generator. Ideally, the ideal setup is to have your solar. A lot of rural projects, if you've already got a shed, put your solar on the shed. You can have it there before you start, and then you can run power off that. The problem we found on the last couple is the rebates. I believe rebates need the house to be finished to get the rebate. So we were coming across problems we would run a generator up until the roof is on. This was our plan. Get the roof on, get a couple of solar panels on there, and then run the system. But they were very reluctant to do that because the rebates were more beneficial to wait until the end. So we ended up running a generator the whole project on that particular project. On this project, we got a small shipping container on site, put 4 or 5 panels on that shipping container, and then ran power from that throughout the build. We just hired a container and then he took it away. So that might have been $600 for the build to hire the container. And John was pretty flexible with that. He's pretty flexible. Some solar guys are a bit more rigid in how they want to operate and don't want to come to site twice and things like that. So it's probably partly talking to your solar guy and having your solar guy talk to your builder and make sure they can come up with a process that'll work for all parties. But ideally, if you have a shed, you can have it all set up on the shed and then this running, and then you just run your main box in the shed and you just run an underground trench to the house, and then that supplies the house. And often a shed is located with a big enough roof to put 10 kilowatts on or whatever's needed.
Fantastic. That's a good insight. Yeah, that's interesting. It's good that you go to the effort with that. Yeah, that's fantastic.
I might just mention that we ran this problem of the rebate having to wait till the house was finished. In fact, it was probably 4 or 5 months, 6 months after the roof was on before we actually moved in and got the solar system installed. And in retrospect, I think it might have been better for us to forget the rebate and just install the solar system as part of the build. It would have been easier for everybody, and I think it wouldn't have been so much more expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, just on that, with building mine recently, solar installation was an integral part of the build, and so it was all wired in, ready to go. But again, I didn't get it put on until after, so I could claim the rebate. But yeah, it was a bit easier after, with all the wiring already installed through the ceiling and etc. Yeah.
Okay, another question, Liz, if you're happy.
Yeah, just wondering, with the off-grids, how many kilowatts have you got? I think, in fact, the Sedgwick one had 10 and now they've got 15. Is that right, Scott?
I didn't know they had upgraded to 15.
Upgraded because they've found that those young kids get up really early and use a lot of power in the morning.
Yeah, okay. Over the years, I've seen off-grid systems in Bendigo as small as 6.5 and 7 kilowatts, and with 2 young kids, and barely ever turn the generator on. They might turn the generator on a little bit in winter, but not a lot, and it doesn't rely on it. And I think feedback, I popped in there a year later, and it only happened because they just got used to being able to use the dryer in summer, that they were using the dryer in winter and they shouldn't have been. So it was just a misuse of how to manage it more than running out of power. That being said, a lot of solar people are pushing for 10 kilowatts with families. And it changes. I see smaller systems in Bendigo and larger systems in Ballarat. You've got less heating days, but it's definitely a question to have with your off-grid specialist to understand your home, your location, and the specifics around you, rather than seeing what everyone else did. I think that's possibly a little bit dangerous. The unfortunate thing is it's actually hard to find a really good off-grid specialist who's actually really good at what they do. There's a lot of people that do it and probably just don't have the depth of experience that should be. It's not, putting solar on your roof, yes, you need to know what you're doing, but doing off-grid, it's something you're relying on, and you don't want to stuff it up.
No, I think that's why John at Bendigo Solar Services does a lot of off-grid.
Yeah.
And he also uses quite a lot of Australian batteries and things like that. So good warranties and good ability to address any issues.
Yeah.
And I'm probably quite unusual for someone to add more after, but I think Eliza and Todd, also you've got to get used to being on off-grid. So you've got to get used to using your power when the sun's out, and just keep an eye on your meters. And the last few weeks they ran out of power because they just didn't realise how to balance everything. But now they've got apps on their phone, and their phone tells them, when they've got heaps of solar. So they'll run around putting the washing machine on and the heater on, and trying to use that power, because a lot of it is also using excess power. So so Ronnie, how many kilowatts are you putting on?
There is no exact figure yet, at least at this stage. However, we're aiming towards 20 kilowatts, maximizing our solar technician, who's been dealing with for years now, installing solar for us. We've been in our businesses, we've been installing 40 kilowatts of energy generation. So because we don't know exactly yet how much of the roof area we can use, but 20 kilowatts, maximize it, and the battery is expandable. So at the moment we're going to start with 6. However, we can expand up to 10, and we're using Power Plus Energy, which is Australian-made batteries, which has 4 kilowatts for each unit. So we can store up to 24 kilowatts to start with. That's what we're doing.
I don't think you're gonna have any problems.
Oh yeah, I was still worried that we might not have enough, but with all the weather.
Unless you're going to leave, split systems running day and night, etc., etc.
That's good to know. Yeah.
And also, if you're home during the day and you can use the energy during the day, you're all set. I guess if you're out at work all day, then that's more of an issue. But if you put your split system on during the day when the solar's on, and then you turn it off about 6 o'clock at night, your house stays warm when it's well insulated. So these new builds, they don't need as much, do they, Richard?
Indeed.
How many kilowatts have you got?
I've got a total of 5 kilowatts of solar, 7.7 panels on a 6 kilowatt inverter, 3-phase. And we've got some batteries as well.
And I presume you're not getting any bills.
Yeah, that's right. I think the last one was a credit.
So
there's a question here. We sort of touched a little bit on insulation earlier, and this might be more of a retrofitting one, but I'd be interested. We've got quite a range of experience here. So there's a question earlier on about spray-in foam external wall insulation, and essentially, is there variation in the types that you can get, and then also what might be some of the benefits of that, but also maybe the worries about doing something like that. So is there anyone who could speak to that at all?
Yeah, I can. There's a product called Superfill, SUPAFIL. It's a loose fill product from a company called Knauf, KNAUF. It's the most commonly used retrofit wall insulation. It's not a foam. I think you mentioned foam, John, but no, it's a loose fill blow-in material. It's silicone treated glass fiber. So it's very soft to touch. The silicone treatment makes it hydrophobic, so it doesn't absorb water, and it's blown in through via air pressure through a hose into all cavities. The best situation in a retrofit situation is if you've got a brick veneer house with a tiled roof, because often you can access the wall cavity from just by pushing tiles out of the way. Otherwise, you're going to have to drill holes.
Yeah, and the external cladding, I'm guessing. So say if it was, weatherboards or what have you, you're drilling holes, aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully that.
Yeah, I've got some comments on the spray foam. There's only the benefits don't outweigh the negatives, in my opinion, on the spray foam. We've done one project with spray foam after researching it and looking at some of the benefits. Some of the benefits is it does create an airtight wall, and it also has a good R value per centimetre of thickness. The biggest downside is probably the cost, and also getting the contractors there, and you're introducing a new contractor from a builder's point of view. There's maybe 3 or 4 suppliers in Melbourne that we could find. So, if I was to insulate a home, I can get insulation locally next week. And if I'm a bit short, I can get more. But with the spray foam you're getting guys that you've never dealt with before that might only have 1 day window of opportunity. And the waste on site also, we were left with 2 large drums of excess product. That's more so that's the foam spray foam, not the loose fill that Richard was talking about. That's a much better product than using a spray foam. And then also just the greenhouse gases of the spray foams. I don't know the comparisons to say bat insulation, but it's not very good. Would be my understanding.
So in a new build situation, you really, I think it's pretty clear that bats are the best approach.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's just build on that then. So say I've got a weatherboard home. Would you say that would be a better scenario would be ripping off boards at different levels and actually just fitting regular insulation in from that point of view? Or
if the home needs significant maintenance or replacement of the weatherboards, then yes, do it all at once. But if the weatherboards are in good condition, then it's probably going to be better to drill holes and do a loose fill and deal with the holes.
I'd agree. The cost to remove all the weatherboards would be too high, but the one benefit of going to that extreme is not just the foam or the insulation you could install, but then being able to put a proper weather barrier on the outside of the home is probably one of the biggest benefits, as opposed to just insulation.
So you meant putting a breathable wrap in as well?
Yeah. Behind the weatherboard, then installing a new weatherboard. But we've retrofitted old weatherboard homes in Bendigo, and it's still quite. You could have a house that's 90 years old with a good quality weatherboard, with an old, timber weatherboard that's still in good enough condition to question whether you should go ahead and replace all of that. Because these days you're most likely going to replace it with a cement sheet weatherboard. So if we look at it from a green point of view, you're ripping out old timber to put in cement. There's all those considerations.
And I'll just add here that for someone who's done it all, Ian at Epiloc, who's coming up in the next session, they took all the weatherboards. He took all the weatherboards off their house, put insulation in and put them all back on again.
Yep, reused them.
Correct, yep. And also crawled underneath and did it. So, yep, if you want any questions about how to do it, Ian can answer those in the next session.
That's great.
Yeah, I think Colin had a question about HRV. Did we want to get to that?
Yeah, let's do it.
So if people aren't aware, HRV, heat recovery ventilation, it's a technique for ventilating houses that's appropriate when you've got very high levels of air tightness. And passive houses always have these types of systems. I think we'll start to see more interest in mechanical ventilation systems, because often opening a window isn't viable, and there's increased awareness that making houses more airtight is a good thing. So the heat recovery ventilation isn't a heating and cooling system, but it's very efficient in that it lessens the heating and cooling needed, because the best way to think about it is that it's a balanced system. So it sends out stale air and extracts the heat from the stale air to pre-warm the incoming fresh air, and it distributes that through ducting to every room. So each room will have either a supply vent or a return vent. And the key thing there is it's running continuously, and the ducting is small. It's only about that round. And the ducting is inside the thermal envelope. Normally, when we see ducted heating and cooling systems, the ducting is outside the thermal envelope, and that's one of the problems with it. But yeah, HRV ducting is inside the thermal envelope, and that's part of what makes it very efficient.
That's great. And I suppose that would maybe dovetail into the question here about passive house, because obviously the heat recovery is so synonymous with that. Sorry, I just lost the question. Here I am about to say. So it's Colin again. So what's the difference between an eco build, which I suppose is maybe just a broad term, and passive house standard? So I mean, maybe delineate the key points between those two, Richard, if that makes sense.
What was the first one? Eco build?
Yeah, quote unquote eco build. So I guess that's more just a general, maybe an eco build.
Okay.
Term a green build.
Yeah, often the term used is passive house principles versus passive house certified. So it's using the methods. There's a range of techniques that go to making up a passive house, and if you take it on a passive house principles approach, you can basically choose which techniques you want and to the degree to which you want to apply them, without needing to go through all the hoops of certification. So, for example, a certified passive house needs an air tightness level of no more than 0.6 air changes per hour. Whereas if you took a passive house principles approach, you wouldn't have to be bound by that number. You could be a bit more relaxed about accepting an air tightness level, maybe between 1 and 2, which is a lot easier to achieve. Yeah, one of the most characteristic parts of a passive house is the wall construction, because it's got 2 layers. So as Scott would know, the normal building technique involves a sarking on the outside, and then the inside layer is plaster, whereas a passive house uses an internal wall wrap. Often the brand used is Intello, and then having the plaster in addition to that. So the choice to Colin's question, if you were going full passive house, then you've got to do that double layer wall construction, whereas if you're going principles, you've got a bit more latitude about whether you go the whole hog and add that second layer or not.
Like that.
You can get very good results without that, and yeah, so you don't have to have that extra cost if you don't need it.
Although I think I won't say ordinary builders, but more builders are using the blower door test now to make sure there's no big leaks in houses. Also, the BSG has a thermal camera, so if you're a BSG member, you can borrow the thermal camera, and this will give you a good idea of if there's any real cold spots in your house, or in summer, any hot spots.
Can I just add to that? When we bought a blower door machine a few years ago, and we started putting them on just a few builds just to see where they're leaking and to get an idea. And we did a house, it just had a builder's range double glazed window. We wrapped it nice. It was a slightly better quality window, but it wasn't to the standard we normally put in now. Had anti-con roof, but it just had a couple of split systems, and we had like 5 air changes in the house, which is actually a pretty good for a standard build. It's actually not that bad compared to 12, which is the Australian average. We then did another project, exact same specifications, and it had a ducted air conditioning, and we couldn't even, it was that leaky that we could not get a reading. So it had, the same windows, the same wraps on the outside, installed by the same carpenters, and we couldn't get a reading on that. So you've got to start to ask the question, and Richard probably agrees with this, is the ducting adding to my heating and cooling load? Like you install ducted heating and cooling to keep the house at a nice temperature, but by installing that, you're actually needing it more, because your house, the leakage was crazy on that house. It was pretty interesting to see, and I think, if you shouldn't have to build a passive house. We'll get 0.6 to start to look at, okay, where is the house leaking? You can learn from that, and then as a builder or a building designer, start to go, okay, let's start to change some products, some details, to make some change. And it doesn't have to be 0.6. If we can get our air tightness down to 6 or 5 or 4, it's a good way forward, good start.
Yeah, houses built here at the Cape are required to have blower door tests done, and they need to be, the threshold they set is 7, but most houses are achieving 3 to 5.
Yeah, and that's perfect for someone who doesn't introduce mechanical heating. Anything less than 3, you should start to think about, sorry, not mechanical heating, mechanical ventilation. Anything less than 3, you should start thinking about ventilation and how you're going to ventilate. And anything, I think it's less than 1.5 or 2, you should definitely be having a mechanical ventilation.
So Scott, would you be building more passive houses than eco at the moment? I know that's a spec.
We're actually seeing a drop off in passive houses in our inquiry. I don't know if that's because there are more people offering it, or if there are a lot more architects doing it, because it is a budget issue often. In the past, we've done 3 or 4 a year, and we've always had a few in our books. And right now we've got one in Bendigo, and I don't know if we've got too many. We've just had another inquiry for an airtight one, but we've seen it slow down, but we haven't seen it slow down in people just wanting energy efficient homes. And again, I don't know if it's just because there's more people in the market taking that inquiry, and especially architects. But it's the passive house movement has grown every year. 5 years ago or 6 years ago when I started, it was unheard of, and there was all but 40 consultants or 50 consultants. Now every year they're qualifying another 30 consultants and 30 tradesmen. So it's growing and it's growing, and I just see it on Instagram and Facebook. The amount of people putting it out there is tenfold what it was even 3 years ago. So it's really good, and it's something that will just continue to just grow and grow, because once you see it and understand it, it's pretty silly to ignore it.
Yeah, I think passive house has a lot to teach us, but I think that certified passive houses will remain a niche thing.
Yeah, I agree.
The standards are probably much more rigorous than most people need and are prepared to pay for. The certification process that I'm still going through is painful.
Okay, well, we've talked a lot of technical stuff. The question I'd like to ask all our participants at this stage is, what do you love about your house? We might start with Jill and John, because I know they love their house.
And we really do love our house. Partly because before we moved, it's not that, partly before we moved in, we felt very sad at leaving our old house, which was fairly eco built 45 years ago. Coming and downsizing as much as we have, it was a very big step. That some of the delights have been getting rid of stuff. With a smaller house, you don't need so much stuff, and there isn't room for so much stuff. So we had to be ruthless in getting rid of it. It took us probably 4 passes through all our possessions, tossing aside some each time. But we managed that, and it's so liberating not having lots of stuff. And now I must say, we have quite a lot of cupboard space, in cupboard storage in this house. But the things we like about it is that it's light and airy. The concrete floor is so easy to look after. We miss having the high feed-in tariff that we had at our old place with solar panels. But yes, you still save money by having solar panels. What else?
Well, one of the things we've noticed, going back to what Jill said, that 45 years ago, we tried to build a solar efficient house just from first principles, because they were just not heard of then. And that went very well. But what we noticed about new house is that it's not drafty. It might be built to passive house standards, but it really, the lack of leakage, air leakage is really fantastic. It makes it so much more comfortable. I'll also mention that Brendan Wild, our builder, borrowed the sustainability group Thermal Energy camera towards the end of the build, and went around and checked that all their wall insulation was intact, and was able to patch up a few bits where the tradesmen not quite got in the right places. So that probably helped too. But yeah, it is just a very comfortable and convenient place to live.
And we are sold on the blinds we have, the honeycomb blinds we have, Luxaflex. They are expensive, but they don't take up any space, and they seal the window areas pretty well. And so, and they do let light through. In our old house, we had curtains, which were good, and pelmets. But in summer, on the really hot days, we would pull the curtains to keep the heat out. And it kept the light out too. Here we can pull the blinds on a hot day. Not that we've really had much in the way of heat in the last year. But last summer there were some hot days, and it's still light inside, but keeping heat out. We draw the blinds at night in winter to keep the heat in, and in summer we open it up at night and open the windows. And I do like drafts in a breeze on a hot day, or a hot night. So we open windows then. That's probably gone on long enough.
And great mentioning the blinds. That's something everyone else can do. And yeah, I mean, you don't have to get Luxaflex. I have the cheaper IKEA ones, and they're fabulous. And they're a lot cheaper. But yeah.
Maybe we made a mistake.
No. I think that yours would be better, but mine are okay. So we won't ask Scott, but I will tell a little bit of Eliza and Todd. If you look at the video, you'll see the landscape around their place is just extraordinary. They're on top of a rocky outcrop in Sedgwick, and just all around is just wonderful, wonderful visions of, at the moment, green and rocks. And they're also revegetating their land and working with the local land care group. And I think they love being off grid, because a young family growing up, expenses would normally increase with a house, but they're off grid. So they're covered for the raising of their children. So yeah, I mean, they love it out there, and it's not far from Bendigo for work. And yeah, they just couldn't be with us today. So yeah, Richard, I think we might ask you, what do you love about living in the passive house?
Okay, well, I could probably best answer that if I just I'll share my screen. A couple of things. The house is just stunningly beautiful. So this picture captures one of the things that I like most about the house. This is on the right is the kitchen window looking over the top of the garage. And we've got a green roof on the garage, and this picture captures a couple of things. It was one of the most ingenious parts of the design was the ability to capture the sight lines. This is looking to the southwest, obviously across to the ocean. But what's happened here is the inside of the architect was that the garage could be dropped down to a degree that we could look over the top of it, and therefore it's not taking up, visually that space. So that was something I really like, is just having that open up the vista by dropping the garage down and looking over the top. And an unexpected part of that was the extent to which the sight lines are mirrored in the windows. So if you look at the right hand side, how the horizon is mirrored in the window, and I think that just looks wonderful. And you see that on the north facade as well, because we've got these ribbon windows that reflect the horizon. The other, there's a lot about the house that I really love, but I'll just say one other thing that was a surprise. This is the ensuite. The window on the right is quite high and is north facing. And on a winter's morning, you can be having a shower and having the sun coming in. So you're literally showering in the sun, and it was unexpected and something that is just a delight to experience. So yeah, they're just two things about the house that I'd say that we really appreciated.
Yeah, it certainly looks fantastic outside. Richard, might ask you this question while we're doing passive house. Someone wants to know, if you get certification, does it give you any rebates or any financial reason for doing the certification?
Short answer, no. No, it's
Yes.
just a plaque on a
You're doing it
wall.
for the love of it.
It's bragging rights.
Okay. How are we going for time, John? And have we got any questions we've missed?
Yeah, so we sort of do have a few broad questions around. I think we could probably group them around recommendations for builders. And I think we're probably a little bit reluctant to be plugging anything specific. I'll just sort of say that. But what I would say is, if you are in the chat today and you've seen those questions where people have asked about recommendations around builders, I encourage you to direct message them in the Zoom. So and that's sort of, we're sort of just a bit reluctant to recommend anyone specifically. So hopefully that addresses that issue. So I guess, we've got our sort of last 5 minutes here, and it's been a real pleasure hearing these insights. I think we've covered off most of the technical questions, which a lot of people are having, which is around the passive house, which has been really great. It's also been awesome. I guess we could probably give Ronnie a go on what he's going to enjoy the most about their future house, perhaps. So obviously we've asked Richard and Jill and John about what they love about the house. Ronnie, what do you anticipate as being the most, I guess, and what is it you're anticipating the most about your house?
Really very excited about this house. It's basically, aside from the stunning views that we can wake up to and be inspired, this house will harness energy from the sun, water from the rain that we will collect. We're also recycling our water through the worm farm waste system. We're using a lot of recycled materials as well. So we're able to take from the energy and give back, take from the environment and give back as well to the environment. It's also been designed to cater for our lifestyle. So we're able to, have guests enjoy living in a highly efficient house, but also have our own privacy, because it's got 4 modules and we're able to separate those areas. So very excited about this. Looking forward, hopefully next year.
Yay.
Good luck.
Can I add to that a little bit? I think when people build an energy efficient home, they're building a house based on their values. And those values have been around for a long time and then will continue for a long time. When you build a house and those values are put aside and or haven't been realised yet, and your decisions are all about how fancy the stone bench top is or how expensive the cladding is or things like that, those go in and out of fashion, and they're not values that you've had for 10 years. Like it's current, when you're building a house only on trying to keep up with everyone or that's bigger and better, there's obviously it's your own custom home and you're excited to move into it. But I think we see clients that come to us and that process before the even build can be 2, 3, 4 years long. And then to get to that at the end, it's pretty liberating for people, and they're, moving into that finally. And it's often a house that you build forever. It's not a stepping stone house that you want to build quickly because of whatever reason. I mean, you can go to a volume builder and get a house built in a year or less, or you can go through the process of building something that holds your values and it's something that you'll cherish for a long, long time. And it's more than just paint on the walls and flooring and carpet or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's right, Scott. I think the design process, I've been mentioning a few times that it can take 4 or 5 years to proceed with a custom built house like these, and but it's just always been worth it.
And people ask, what's the cost benefit? If you're going to spend more on insulation and more on heating and better quality products, the cost benefit is on day one when you move in. It's not about when am I going to get my money back. You're investing in yourself. You're investing in yourself and your family.
And you're future-proofing yourself.
You're future-proofing yourself. There are definitely cost benefits to things like solar and more efficient products, but when building a passive house, you're not always going to get your money back if you sell it, but are you planning on selling it? You move in on day one and the feeling's different. Your family growing up in a different home and your kids are growing up in a different home, and the benefits are there. You're investing it in yourself and your family, not so much looking to get your money back, which some people get stuck on, and they will never go down the path of what others do.
If I could just wrap up with some advice for people considering new builds, I'd say less is more. Go for quality, not quantity. Don't be afraid to pay for good design. We paid for an excellent designer to come up with a bespoke build, and we think it was money extremely well spent. There's a lot of general advice you could give, but just to restrict it to 3 points, I'd say invest in really good windows. There's a tendency in Australia to undervalue the importance of good windows, and that we tend to think that we can get by with windows that are X% of the cost of the build. I think you should say it should be 2X. Don't be afraid to build in the cost of the windows as a bigger fraction of the total build, just to get excellent windows, and you won't regret. No one ever said, "I wish I didn't get such good windows."
I would, as a very general rule of thumb, we see people, if you look at a standard builder, people spend $30,000 on joinery and $12,000 on windows.
Yeah,
it should match your joinery budget as a minimum, is how I feel. And we've seen that across the board. Windows and joinery, it should be closer to the percentage of the build to each other, rather than sacrificing on windows just to get more of something else.
Yeah, heartily agree. We should have covered everybody's windows, but look, we've had a fantastic session. Is there any vital questions we need, or we might finish there with?
We're pretty good there.
I think everybody loves their environmentally constructed houses. So, and we all should be just aiming to do as best we can with them, because we've had John and Jill with, I won't say bottom of the range, but middle range ceiling up and insulation and everything, to Richard with the top of the range, and they're all happy.
Yeah. So if people are interested, I do consults for people doing new builds as well as consults for people doing retrofits. So I'm doing a bunch in Wood End for a developer. So if you want a Zoom consult or an ongoing sort of design buddy to help hold your hand through the process and work with the builder, I'm happy to do that.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for coming on board with your expertise, Richard. It's just invaluable. And also, I think we might give My Efficient Electric Home another plug, because the work you do on there is amazing. And
thank you. Yeah, join. There's about 70,000 of us there now, so it's the movement is growing, and yeah, all electric homes. Something that people weren't thinking about a few years ago, but it's really getting some currency and some traction.
Yeah, and all our builds today are all electric. So yeah, that's just the way to go. And also in the next session, we have someone who's gone from gas to all electric house with a battery and an electric car. So yeah, we'll just have a break for lunch. And if you come back, there's heaps more inspiration coming, because these people have had to do it hard. Building new is great, but these people have pulled the walls off, injected insulation. They've gone off gas, changed everything. We've got Rhiannon and Andrew who have done a whole school. And my comment to them halfway through the interview was, haven't you ever watched Grand Designs? Because, you know, it got to the stage they had to replace the whole roof and that sort of thing. John's Own Place is in there. And yeah, Gus is restoring an iconic Bendigo roundhouse, one that just doesn't have one round section, it has 3. So yeah, some really great inspiration coming up as well. But I'd really like to thank our participants. I go and annoy them quite a lot and ask them lots of annoying questions, and they sit down with me. And yeah, so just thanks everyone for participating, because yeah, we've already had people say today that it's really helped them already, and that past days they've used to build on to do things to make their houses more sustainable. So
yeah, and thanks for your hard work, Liz.
oh,
Thank you so much, Liz and John.
Thanks, Ronnie. Okay, we'll wind up and have some lunch, everyone.